Hi there. Welcome to Hushed History Channel. Tonight, we're settling into the most uncomfortable throne in human history. You're wearing the imperial purple, standing in the Roman Senate as hundreds of aristocratic eyes bore into you, calculating exactly how many days you'll survive before someone slips a blade between your ribs. The marble beneath your feet is still stained from the last emperor's blood, though the slaves did their best to scrub it clean. Here's a fun reality check. Statistically speaking, you've got about a 1 in 4 chance of dying peacefully in your bed. And that's being generous. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing this community span the globe. Now, let's drift back in time. You wake up in the Imperial Palace on the Palatine Hill, and congratulations, you've just inherited the worst job in the ancient world. Sure, you rule over 50 million souls from Britain to Mesopotamia, but that purple toga you're wearing, it's basically a giant target painted on your back. The moment you accepted the throne, whether through birth, adoption, or good old-fashioned murder, you entered a game where everyone wants you dead and the rules keep changing. Your morning begins with a delightful tradition, checking if you're still alive. This isn't paranoia talking, it's basic survival instinct. Your predecessor Augustus used to wake up every morning and put on a leather cuirass under his toga, convinced someone would stab him during the morning salutatio. He wasn't wrong to worry. The senators filing into your reception hall right now, half of them were probably involved in the last imperial assassination plot. They smile, they bow, they call you Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. But behind those practiced grins, they're calculating. How weak are you? How strong? Who's backing you? Who could replace you? The Senate itself presents your first impossible balancing act. These aren't just wealthy aristocrats. They're the descendants of families who've been ruling Rome since before your great-great-grandfather was born. They remember the Republic, or at least they remember their grandfathers remembering it. Every time you make a decision without consulting them, you're acting like a tyrant. Every time you do consult them, you're weak and indecisive. There's literally no winning move here. Marcus Aurelius, everybody's favorite philosopher emperor, spent half his time writing meditations on virtue and the other half executing senators for treason. Even the good emperors had to get their hands dirty. You stride through the palace corridors, past frescoes depicting your divine ancestors, most of whom died horribly. There's Caligula, stabbed 40 times by his own guards. Claudius, poisoned by mushrooms served by his loving wife. Nero, forced to commit suicide in a dirty basement while whimpering, "What an artist dies in me." The paintings are supposed to inspire legitimacy, but mostly they serve as a cheerful reminder of your probable fate. Historians still argue whether displaying these death portraits was meant as a warning to emperors or a how-to guide for assassins. Your secretary approaches with the morning's correspondence. Hundreds of wax tablets and papyrus scrolls from every corner of the empire. The governor of Syria reports suspicious troop movements. The prefect of Egypt complains about grain shipments. Some random citizen in Gaul is petitioning about his neighbor's fence. And you have to care about all of it, because ignoring the wrong message could spark the rebellion that ends with your head on a spike. Here's a fun detail most people don't know. Emperors personally answered hundreds of legal petitions daily. Imagine being the supreme judge for 50 million people with no computer, no database, just exhausted slaves taking dictation, while you try to remember if you already ruled on a similar case 3 years ago. The real kicker: you can't trust anyone to help you. That secretary taking notes could be reporting to your enemies. Your food taster, yeah, you need one of those now, might be bribed to let just the right poison through. Even your wife. Well, let's just say imperial marriages have a worse track record than modern Hollywood. You're surrounded by people, constantly performing ceremonies, hosting dinners, attending games, but you're fundamentally alone. The phrase, "heavy lies the crown," was basically invented for Roman emperors. Except your crown comes with a complimentary death warrant. The paranoia isn't just in your head. It's a survival mechanism finely tuned by generations of dead emperors. You push away your breakfast plate, even though the food taster survived his sampling. Maybe the poison's slow acting. Maybe it's in the wine instead. Maybe the taster's been turned and developed an immunity. These aren't crazy thoughts when you remember that Britannicus dropped dead at dinner right in front of Nero, who calmly explained it away as an epileptic fit while the boy's lips turned blue. Your dining companions pretended to believe him because calling out the obvious murder would have made them next. Your morning routine involves what modern therapists would call hypervigilance, but what you call Tuesday. Every doorway could hide an assassin. Every gift might be poisoned. Every invitation could be a trap. Domitian had the palace walls lined with polished moonstone, so he could see who was behind him at all times. Didn't save him. His assassins just waited until he was reading a fake report about a conspiracy, ironically enough, then stabbed him while his hands were full. The paranoia actually makes you easier to kill because predictable paranoia creates predictable patterns. You summon your barber, and here's where things get really fun. This man holds a razor to your throat every single day. One quick slash and you're done. Commodus allegedly tested his barbers by having them shave condemned criminals first. If the criminal survived, the barber got to keep his job and his head. Julius Caesar, back when being dictator was still a temporary gig, used to have multiple barbers work simultaneously so none of them could plan anything. You've settled for having your most trusted freedman hold a sword to the barber's back during the whole process. Everyone's tense, which really doesn't help with getting a smooth shave. The palace itself feeds your paranoia. It's a maze of corridors, secret passages, and hidden chambers built by centuries of increasingly paranoid rulers. Nero added revolving dining rooms and collapsing ceiling panels, officially for entertaining guests, but perfect for eliminating enemies. The archaeology shows false walls, concealed doors, and what historians still argue whether they're escape routes or assassination chambers. You've got maps, but you know there are passages even you don't know about. Previous emperors made sure of that, keeping their escape routes secret even from their successors. Smart for them, terrifying for you. Your personal slaves present another delightful paradox. You need them for everything: dressing, bathing, carrying messages, preparing food. But slaves have murdered plenty of emperors. Epaphroditus helped Nero commit suicide. Though helped might be generous since Nero was hesitating, and Epaphroditus basically finished the job. You could treat them well to ensure loyalty, but Pertinax was famously kind to his slaves, and they still let his assassins walk right in. Treat them harshly, and you're definitely getting poisoned. It's almost like there's no good way to maintain a system built on human misery. Even sleep offers no refuge. Caligula suffered from insomnia so severe he'd wander the palace at 3 a.m, talking to the moon, whether the insomnia caused the crazy or the crazy caused the insomnia. Historians still debate. You've got guards outside your chamber, but guards can be bribed. You could sleep in a different room each night, but servants talk and patterns emerge. Some emperors kept concubines not for pleasure, but as human shields. Harder to stab someone when there's a terrified girl in the way. Though that assumes your concubines haven't been turned against you, which, let's be honest, they probably have. The morning briefing with your intelligence network, yes, you need spies now, reveals the usual cheerful news. 3 senators were seen meeting at midnight. Your cousin's been recruiting gladiators. The German legions haven't sent reports in 2 months. Any of these could be nothing. All of them could be everything. Hadrian had an extensive network of frumentarii, grain supply officers who doubled as secret police, reporting on everyone from senators to slaves. He knew everything and trusted no one, which kept him alive but probably contributed to his boyfriend drowning himself in the Nile. Absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it isolates, terrorizes, and slowly drives you insane. Your mother enters without being announced, because of course she does. She smiles sweetly while reminding you that she could have strangled you in your crib, but chose not to. So really, you owe everything to her. This is what passes for maternal affection in the imperial family. You smile back while calculating whether she's here to support you or scout your defenses for whichever relative she's currently backing. The smart money's on the latter. Imperial mothers have a terrifying track record. Agrippina probably poisoned Claudius to put Nero on the throne. Then Nero had her murdered when she got too controlling. Circle of life, imperial addition. Speaking of people who are supposed to protect you, let's talk about your Praetorian Guard. These elite soldiers, handpicked and paid triple wages, have exactly one job: keeping you alive. Funny thing about that job description, it turns out the best way to keep an emperor alive is to replace him with someone who pays better. You're essentially surrounded by armed mercenaries who figured out they can auction off your throne to the highest bidder. It's like having a security system that regularly holds garage sales featuring your life. The Praetorians started noble enough. Augustus created them as the first permanent bodyguard unit. 9 cohorts of the finest soldiers in Rome. By the time you're wearing the purple, they've turned regicide into a business model. They murdered Caligula and made Claudius emperor, literally dragging him out from behind a curtain where he was hiding, thinking he was next. Claudius was smart enough to give them a massive donative. That's a fancy word for please don't kill me money. Setting a precedent that haunts you now. Every time you pass those gleaming breastplates in the corridor, you're mentally calculating whether you can afford to keep them happy. The most insane example. After murdering Pertinax, who'd been emperor for a whopping 86 days, the Praetorians literally held an auction. Didius Julianus won by offering 25,000 sesterces per soldier. He got to be emperor for 66 days before someone with a bigger army showed up. The guards who sold him the throne? They stepped aside and let his executioners in. That's your elite protection force. Guys who treat the Roman Empire like a particularly violent eBay listing. You review the guard roster, knowing full well it's pointless. Your Praetorian prefect swears loyalty while probably maintaining a short list of your potential replacements. These aren't subtle men. When they killed Galba, they paraded his head around on a spear. When they decided Nero had to go, they simply abandoned their posts and went home, leaving him defenseless. The message was clear. We don't even need to dirty our swords. You're already dead. Here's a detail that really twists the knife. You have to keep these potential murderers close. They guard your bedroom, taste your food, after the official taster, because redundancy, and stand behind you at every public appearance. They know your routines, your weaknesses, when you're drunk, when you're sick, who you're sleeping with. They're reading your correspondence over your shoulder right now. Wave to them. Go ahead. They love the attention. Just remember that Caracalla was murdered by a Praetorian while taking a roadside bathroom break. Even your most private moments aren't safe. The payment structure makes everything worse. A new emperor traditionally gives a massive bonus to secure loyalty. But here's the catch. If you pay too much, you look weak and desperate. Pay too little, and mysterious barbarian raids start happening near your bedroom. Claudius paid 15,000 sesterces per man. Nero paid 20,000. Marcus Aurelius tried to be reasonable and nearly faced a coup. You're trapped in an inflationary death spiral where the price of not being murdered keeps going up. Your daily security briefing reveals the usual Praetorian antics. 2 centurions were overhead discussing your unfortunate health. A guardsman was seen leaving a senator's house at dawn. Someone's been spreading rumors about better donatives under a new emperor. You could investigate, but that requires trusting other Praetorians to investigate their brothers. It's turtles all the way down. If turtles were heavily armed and openly discussing your murder, the truly maddening part, you need them. Without the Praetorians, the urban mob would tear you apart. The Senate would have you strangled within hours. Foreign armies would march on Rome unopposed. They're simultaneously your greatest threat and your only protection. Like a medication, where the side effects include sudden death, but stopping it guarantees immediate death. Historians still argue whether having Praetorians increased or decreased imperial life expectancy. The smart money says it's a wash. You try to build alternative power bases, maybe create a new guard unit personally loyal to you. Septimius Severus tried that, dismissing the Italian Praetorians and replacing them with provincial soldiers. Worked great until his son Caracalla was murdered by, wait for it, a Praetorian. Turns out changing the accent doesn't change the fundamental problem of surrounding yourself with armed men who've realized they're the real power in Rome. The morning parade starts, and you stand on the platform watching 9,000 armed bodyguards march past. They salute and shout your name, same as they did for the last emperor. And the one before that. You wonder which one's planning to shove a sword in your back. Probably the one smiling the widest. It's always the smilers. Or maybe the grim one avoiding eye contact. Or that centurion who saluted a fraction too slowly. The beauty of Praetorian paranoia is that you're probably right about at least one of them. The question isn't whether your guards are plotting against you. It's whether they've picked a date yet. Your wife glides into the throne room wearing enough jewelry to fund a small war, which is fitting since she's probably planning one. Imperial marriages make modern reality TV look like friendship bracelets at summer camp. You married her for political alliance. She married you for power. And now you're both stuck in a delightful game of who's going to murder whom first. The smart money's usually on the wife. They've had more practice with poisons. What with cosmetics being lead-based and all. Take Livia, Augustus's beloved wife and history's most successful Black Widow. She allegedly poisoned half the imperial family to ensure her son Tiberius got the throne, smeared poison on figs still growing on the tree so Augustus would pick them himself, thinking they were safe. That's dedication to murder that borders on artistry. Your own wife is taking notes, probably literally. You catch her whispering with her astrologer, never a good sign. Astrologers in Imperial Rome are basically murder consultants with star charts. Your children present an even more depressing picture. These little darlings see you not as father, but as obstacle. The moment they hit puberty, senators start whispering in their ears about destiny and duty and how much better Rome would be without you. Nero had his stepbrother Britannicus poisoned at a family dinner. Commodus probably had his father Marcus Aurelius poisoned, though historians still argue whether it was murder or just terrible medical care. Either way, teaching your heir statecraft means training your most likely replacement. The family breakfast is a masterclass in dysfunction. Your mother criticizes your latest decree while your wife pretends to support you, and your eldest son sulks because you haven't given him enough legions to command. Your younger children are already forming alliances. You can see it in how they pass the bread. Even toddlers in the imperial family understand power dynamics. Your 3-year-old daughter just tried to bribe her nurse with stolen honey cakes. She'll go far, assuming she survives her siblings. Here's what makes imperial family life extra special. Divorce isn't really an option. You can't just send the wife away when she starts getting murdery because her family controls 3 legions and the grain supply from Africa. Plus, she knows all your secrets, your weaknesses, which senators you've bribed, which generals you don't trust. Letting her live outside your direct control is basically signing your own death warrant. So you smile at breakfast while she smiles back, and you both pretend the food taster collapsing last week was just bad shellfish. Your sister arrives for her weekly visit, accompanied by enough guards to siege a small city. She's married to the governor of Syria, which means she has access to the Eastern legions. She kisses your cheek while probably checking if you've lost weight. Illness means vulnerability. Her children, your nephews and nieces, are potential heirs or threats depending on how the next few years go. You've already had to exile one nephew for getting too popular with the troops. He sends lovely letters about how he's definitely not planning rebellion from his villa in Greece. You believe him about as much as you believe your mother's sudden interest in your health. The extended family is even worse. Cousins, uncles, in-laws, all circling like vultures with purple aspirations. Claudius became emperor, basically because he was the last adult male Julio Claudian left standing after everyone else murdered each other. He survived by playing the drooling fool, which honestly might be the smartest strategy anyone's developed. Your own cousins keep suggesting hunting trips and private dinners. You politely decline while making mental notes about which food tasters to assign to which relatives. Your wife's morning correspondence provides delightful reading. Letters from her family discussing the situation. Messages from senators' wives about mutual concerns. A suspicious number of communications with that talented young general on the Danube frontier. She claims it's about planning games for your son's birthday. Right. And Messalina just really liked hosting dinner parties where everyone got naked and competed to see who could sleep with the most people. That actually happened, by the way. Claudius's wife literally held a sex competition with Rome's most famous prostitute. She won. Then married another man during Claudius's business trip. Imperial wives don't do anything halfway. The children's tutors report on their progress, which mainly consists of learning Greek, rhetoric, and how to spot poisoned wine. Your eldest has been asking lots of questions about succession law. Your daughter's been practicing her speeches about duty to Rome. The youngest just tried to stab his pedagogue with a stylus for making him conjugate verbs. Normal family stuff. At least they're showing initiative, though you'd prefer it directed at literally anything other than replacing you. You decree family dinner mandatory, because nothing says healthy family dynamics like forced proximity under armed guard. Everyone attends, smiles frozen, conversation carefully neutral. Your mother mentions how much you look like your deceased father, who she probably poisoned. Your wife compliments your mother's necklace, the one she'll inherit when mother mysteriously dies. Your son asks about military commands again. Your brother-in-law tells an amusing anecdote about grain supplies that's definitely not a veiled threat about starving Rome if you cross him. The evening ends with everyone alive, which counts as a win in imperial family terms. The Senate meeting looms before you like a particularly well-dressed lynch mob. 600 of Rome's finest aristocrats, each one convinced they could run the empire better than you, all forced to pretend you're a god while secretly funding your enemies. You enter the Curia, that ancient chamber where Brutus and friends turned Julius Caesar into a pincushion, and every senator rises in perfect synchronization. The choreographed respect is almost as insulting as open rebellion would be. Your throne sits elevated above them, a psychological trick that just reminds everyone how far you have to fall. The senators arrange themselves by rank, a sea of purple striped togas hiding daggers both literal and metaphorical. That elderly gentleman in the front row, he served under your predecessor's predecessor, and probably helped murder at least one of them. He nods respectfully, while his eyes calculate your weaknesses like a butcher sizing up cattle. Today's agenda includes approving your latest tax proposal, which is about as popular as a plague outbreak. You need money for the legions, for the games, for the massive bribes that keep everyone from murdering you. But every tax increase creates more enemies. Every exemption you grant makes you look weak. Tiberius tried to be financially responsible, and they called him a miser. Nero spent lavishly, and they called him a wastrel. There's literally no winning with these people. The senior consul rises to speak, and here begins the dance. He praises your wisdom, your divine judgment, your extraordinary fiscal acumen, all while subtly undermining every word. Our most generous emperor, whose wisdom surely exceeds our mortal understanding, proposes taxes that will definitely not cause widespread revolt. The sarcasm drips like honey-coated poison. You can't call him out because that would be admitting the insult. You can't ignore it because that shows weakness. So you smile and nod like you're too divine to notice mortal sarcasm. Here's what really makes Senate management impossible. These aren't just random nobles. They're the direct descendants of the families who built Rome, who conquered the Mediterranean, who remember when emperor wasn't even a word. Their ancestors were consuls and generals when yours were probably farmers in some Italian backwater. The social dynamics are brutal. You outrank them politically, but they outrank you socially. And in Rome, social rank is everything. It's like being the new CEO of a company where every board member is old money aristocracy who went to school with each other's great-grandfathers. The debate begins, and it's immediately clear they've coordinated. Senator after senator rises with concerns and suggestions that all mysteriously align. They've met in private, multiple times, despite your spies, and agreed on exactly how to humiliate you while maintaining plausible deniability. One questions the military necessity. Another wonders about provincial loyalty. A third suggests perhaps waiting for more favorable omens. They're not saying no directly. They're death by 1,000 procedural cuts. Your attempts to build a power base within the Senate hit the fundamental paradox. Any senator competent enough to be useful is dangerous enough to be a threat. Promote the talented ones, and you're training your replacement. Promote the incompetent ones, and your government collapses. Sejanus tried to split the difference under Tiberius. Becoming so powerful, the Senate started treating him as co-emperor. Tiberius had him executed, along with his entire family down to the children. The lesson? Your senatorial allies are just enemies with better timing. The tax debate drags on for hours. You could force the issue. You have the legal power. But using it openly makes you a tyrant. Domitian tried ruling through pure imperial decree and ended up stabbed to death by a freedman while reading. The Senate didn't order the hit, but they definitely sent flowers to the funeral. So you sit there, divine and patient, while mortal aristocrats lecture you about fiscal responsibility from their 7-hill mansions staffed by hundreds of slaves. Between speakers, you notice the subtle communications, hand signals, coded phrases, meaningful glances, that network of alliances and feuds going back centuries, none of which include you. Historians still argue whether there was an actual senatorial party or just aligned interests, but from where you're sitting, the distinction doesn't matter. They're united in considering you a temporary inconvenience, differing only in how temporary to make you. Finally, a compromise emerges, not because anyone agrees, but because dinner time approaches and even conspiracy gets hungry. The tax will be approved but reduced, with exemptions for senatorial estates, of course. Implementation delayed until after the harvest, naturally, and a commission formed to study alternatives, which will never meet. You've achieved nothing except surviving another session without open revolt. Victory in the Roman Senate means leaving with the same number of supporters you entered with. The session closes with traditional acclamations of your divine wisdom. 600 voices chanting in unison about your godlike judgment and eternal reign. The same voices that chanted for Nero, for Galba, for Otho, for Vitellius. Sometimes multiple emperors in the same year. They'll chant for your successor too, probably with more enthusiasm. You process out majestically, knowing that at least a dozen senators are heading straight to secret meetings where your death is the first agenda item. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier? At least crocodiles are honest about wanting to eat you. Your military briefing starts with a map of the empire that might as well be a pain chart of your impending migraines. 28 legions scattered across 3 continents, each one commanded by a general who definitely knows he commands more firepower than your Praetorian Guard. Managing these armies without phones, email, or even a reliable postal service is like playing chess blindfolded while your opponents can see the board and also have swords. The fundamental problem? Every successful general becomes a threat. Give a commander enough victories and the legions start chanting his name instead of yours. Refuse to let generals win battles, and barbarians pour across the frontiers. Corbulo conquered Armenia for Nero, so Nero ordered him to commit suicide. Agricola conquered Scotland for Domitian, so Domitian recalled him and probably had him poisoned. The lesson is clear. Be good at your job, but not too good, which is exactly the military doctrine that wins wars. Your correspondence from the frontiers reads like a disaster anthology. The Rhine legions haven't been paid in 3 months and are getting restless. Military code for sharpening their swords and practicing their emperor-acclaiming chants. The Danube forces report increasing barbarian raids, which could be true, or could be their commander manufacturing a crisis to demand more resources. The Syrian legions are dealing with Parthian incursions, or so says the general, who coincidentally wants permission to raise 4 new legions under his personal command. Here's the nightmare scenario that keeps you up at night. Vespasian, nice guy, competent general, crushing the Jewish revolt for Nero. Then Nero dies, and suddenly Vespasian realizes he's got the entire Eastern army under his command, while Rome tears itself apart. 3 emperors later, guess who's wearing the purple? The distance that makes generals dangerous also makes them necessary. Someone has to command those frontier armies, and whoever does automatically becomes your biggest threat. You try rotation policies, shuffle commanders before they get too entrenched, but that assumes you can trust the replacements and that messages arrive in time. A letter to Britain takes 6 weeks minimum, assuming good weather and no bandits. By the time your recall order reaches a general, he's had months to fortify loyalty, steal the payroll, and practice his victory speech. Plus, constantly changing commanders is a great way to lose battles, and nothing destabilizes an emperor like military defeat. The pay situation deserves its own circle of hell. Legionaries need regular payment, or they start eyeing the imperial purple like a get-rich-quick scheme. But paying 28 legions requires massive taxation, which makes civilians hate you, which requires more legions to suppress revolts, which requires more money. It's a death spiral with a really literal death at the end. Septimius Severus figured this out and simply doubled military pay. Great for loyalty, terrible for the economy, which collapsed shortly after. But hey, he died in his bed, so maybe he was onto something. Your spies in the legions, because of course you need spies in your own army, report the usual chaos. Centurions taking bribes, tribunes plotting glory, entire cohorts whose loyalty depends on next month's donative, the legendary Roman discipline everyone talks about. That's for enemies, against their own emperor. Legions are remarkably flexible about oath-breaking. They murdered Galba for being stingy, then murdered his generous successor for being broke. It's almost like there's no good solution here. The morning's crisis involves the German legions, because it always involves the German legions. They've decided their commander would make a better emperor than you, not because they particularly like him, but because he's there and you're here and they're bored. This happens roughly every 5 years, like some sort of violent seasonal migration. Your options are recall the general, who won't come, bribes, which you can't afford, or civil war, which you'll probably lose. Previous emperors have tried threats, hostages, even marriages. Nothing works, because the fundamental equation remains. Distant armies plus ambitious generals equals dead emperors. Communications present another delightful challenge. That urgent message about barbarian invasions. It's 6 weeks old. Your response will take another 6 weeks. By the time orders arrive, the situation's completely changed. But the general will follow your outdated commands exactly, especially if they lead to disaster. He can blame on you. I was just following the divine emperor's explicit orders. He'll say over your funeral pyre. Military engineering provides some of history's most ironic deaths. Carus was allegedly struck by lightning while campaigning, which sounds suspicious when you realize his son immediately abandoned the successful invasion. Trajan died of a stroke while conquering Mesopotamia, or so his wife claimed, while keeping his death secret for days. Your predecessor's predecessor died of fever right after his nephew took command of the Eastern armies. Amazing how often emperors die of natural causes at militarily convenient moments. You sign orders you know won't be followed, approve budgets that won't stop embezzlement, and promote officers who might stay loyal for a few months. The perfect Roman general would be competent enough to win battles, but too stupid to realize he could overthrow you. Unfortunately, military competence and political ambition go together like gladiators and blood. Your best hope? Keep them fighting external enemies and hope they're too busy to fight you. It's not a strategy exactly, more like controlled falling. The morning financial report arrives on your desk like a declaration of war written in numbers. Your treasury secretary, a Greek freedman who understands mathematics better than anyone else in the palace, which is why you trust him least, spreads the scrolls with the expression of a doctor delivering terminal diagnosis. The empire is broke. Not tighten our belts broke, but selling palace furniture while pretending it's religious dedication broke. Here's the beautiful paradox of imperial economics. You rule the wealthiest empire in human history, but can't actually access most of that wealth without causing the very revolts that'll kill you. Tax the provinces too hard. They rebel. Tax the senators. They'll fund your assassination. Tax the plebs. They'll riot. Don't tax anyone. And you can't pay the armies, who'll then march on Rome and install someone who will. It's like being the world's richest beggar. The denarius, Rome's silver currency, has been steadily debased for decades. Or your predecessors discovered the magic of mixing cheaper metals into the coinage, economic alchemy that creates money from nothing. Nero reduced silver content to 90%. By now, you're minting coins that are basically tin with delusions of grandeur. Merchants have started weighing coins instead of counting them, which really undermines the whole trust in imperial currency thing. But what choice do you have? Real silver means fewer coins. Fewer coins means unpaid soldiers. Unpaid soldiers means your head on a spike. Inflation ravages the empire like an invisible plague. Bread that cost 1 sesterce in Augustus's time now costs 16. Soldiers demand higher pay to match rising prices, which requires more debased currency, which drives prices higher. Diocletian will later try to fix this with price controls, declaring the maximum legal cost of everything from wheat to peacocks. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. Markets, unlike senators, don't care about imperial decrees. Your attempts at revenue generation read like a comedy of desperation. Previous emperors have tried everything. Caligula auctioned off gladiators, then forced rich Romans to bid. Vespasian taxed public urinals. Money doesn't smell, he famously said. Caracalla made everyone citizens, not from generosity, but to expand the tax base. You're considering a bachelor tax, a beard tax, and something your advisors are calling a window tax, based on how much light enters houses. When you're inventing taxes on sunlight, the fiscal situation has gotten genuinely dire. The corn dole presents your biggest headache. 300,000 Roman citizens receive free grain, a tradition so sacred that touching it equals instant revolution. Never mind that many recipients are richer than your taxpayers. Never mind that it consumes a third of your budget. Never mind that Egypt basically exists just to feed Rome's unemployed masses. Cancel the dole and you'll have urban warfare by sunset. But maintaining it means you're literally giving away money you don't have to people who hate you anyway. Public works provide another money pit disguised as glory. Every emperor needs construction projects, forums, aqueducts, temples to their own divinity. But these cost fortunes you don't have. Nero built his golden house, a palace so obscenely huge it made him universally hated. Vespasian tore it down and built the Colosseum, which made him universally loved, but also universally broke. You need visible achievements, but can't afford them. So you end up renaming existing buildings and hoping nobody notices. That theatre your predecessor built, it's yours now. Just chisel off his name and add yours. Architectural plagiarism at its finest. Trade regulations offer more opportunities for disaster. The empire runs on commerce, but every merchant is a potential smuggler. Every trade route a path for tax evasion. Your customs officials are magnificently corrupt, taking bribes that probably exceed legitimate revenues. You could crack down, but that requires honest enforcers, who don't exist because anyone honest wouldn't last a week in imperial service. So the taxes leak away like water through a sieve while you pretend the treasury is filling. Here's my favorite historical detail. Emperors often resort to voluntary contributions. You send polite letters to wealthy provincials suggesting they might want to donate to the imperial treasury. Everyone understands these are about as voluntary as breathing underwater. refuse, and suddenly your tax assessment mysteriously increases. Your trade licenses get reviewed. Your son's military careers stall. It's extortion with extra steps. But at least it's traditional extortion. The morning's budget meeting features your financial advisors performing mathematical gymnastics to make expenses match revenues. They've created accounting fiction that would make modern corporations jealous. This month's military pay will be covered by next month's tax revenues, which will definitely arrive on time despite barbarian raids, corrupt officials, and the general mathematical impossibility of the plan. You nod along because acknowledging reality means admitting the empire is running on momentum and prayer. Your signature goes on documents you know are lies, budgets that assume perfect tax collection, zero corruption, and no unexpected expenses like, say, Germanic invasions or volcanic eruptions. The alternative is admitting the Roman Empire, master of the known world, is essentially a prestigious pyramid scheme. At least when it collapses, you probably won't be alive to see it. That's the next emperor's problem. Your job is to keep the illusion running one more day, one more month, one more year, until someone stabs you and inherits this mathematical nightmare. They say money is the root of all evil. In your case, the lack of it is the root of your impending murder. The religious situation in your empire makes your financial crisis look like a minor accounting error. You're simultaneously the Pontifex Maximus of the traditional Roman gods, a living deity in the imperial cult, tolerator of 1,000 mystery religions, an increasingly annoyed observer of this weird Jewish offshoot called Christianity that refuses to just sacrifice to your genius like everyone else. Managing this spiritual chaos is like juggling flaming swords while blindfolded on a tightrope over a pit of religiously motivated assassins. Your morning begins with traditional auguries, because apparently the gods communicate through bird flight patterns and sheep livers. Your haruspex examines the entrails with the seriousness of a heart surgeon, declaring the omens mixed but generally favorable if you avoid major decisions. That's every day. The omens are always conveniently vague enough to be right regardless of what happens. But skip this ritual and watch how fast impiety gets added to your enemy's list of reasons you must die. The state religion is basically political theatre with incense. Jupiter doesn't care if you believe in him, just that you perform the rituals that keep Rome stable. It's social glue disguised as theology. But here's the problem. Nobody actually believes anymore. Your senators mouth prayers to gods they mock at dinner parties. The plebs have moved on to exciting Eastern cults that promise actual salvation instead of just continued Roman dominance. You're the high priest of a religion even you think is nonsense. But abandoning it means abandoning the foundation of Roman authority. The imperial cult adds another layer of absurdity. You're not just emperor, you're a god, or will be after death, or already are in the eastern provinces. The theology is deliberately unclear because clarity would expose how ridiculous it all is. Citizens burn incense to your genius, your divine spirit, which is totally different from worshipping you directly, except when it isn't. Refuse divine honors and you're insulting previous divine emperors. Accept them too eagerly and you're a megalomaniac. Caligula demanded worship as a living god and got assassinated. Tiberius refused most divine honors and also got assassinated. The lesson? Divine status doesn't come with divine protection. Mystery cults proliferate like mushrooms in the dark corners of your empire. Mithraism spreads through the legions, soldiers crawling through bull's blood in underground temples. ISIS worship attracts the women and slaves with promises of eternal life. Cybele's priests castrate themselves in ecstatic frenzies that make your palace orgies look tame. Each cult claims exclusive truth while somehow coexisting with dozens of others. You can't ban them. Too many followers. Can't endorse them. That undermines state religion. So you tolerate this theological chaos while pretending it's all part of Roman religious diversity. Then there's the Christians. Oh, Jupiter, the Christians. They're like that party guest who won't leave and keeps telling everyone else they're doing parties wrong. Every other religion in your empire happily adds, and also Caesar is divine to their prayers. It's basic politeness, like saying bless you after sneezes. But Christians insist there's only one God, and spoiler alert, it's not you. They won't sacrifice to your genius, won't participate in civic festivals, won't even pretend to respect the gods that made Rome great. It's not just impiety, it's sedition with hymns. The Christian problem defies simple solutions. Execute them and they celebrate martyrdom like it's a promotion. Ignore them and they multiply faster than rabbits on aphrodisiac song. Nero blamed them for the Great Fire, which worked temporarily until people noticed Christians didn't actually breathe fire. Your advisors suggest various approaches. Toleration looks weak. Persecution makes martyrs. Or theological debate, like arguing with a brick wall that quotes scripture. Historians still argue whether early imperial persecution was religious or political. From your throne, the distinction is meaningless. They won't worship you, which makes them enemies of the state. Your own religious practices are a careful balance of public piety and private skepticism. You perform every ritual, attend every festival, consult every oracle, while probably believing none of it. But doubt is luxury you can't afford. That time Tiberius skipped the Lupercalia. 3 legions revolted. When Nero performed Greek religious rites, the Senate called him un-Roman. You're trapped between traditional gods you don't believe in and new gods that don't believe in you. The Jews present a different headache. They've got ancient privileges, a temple that rivals yours, and absolutely zero interest in adding your statue to their holy of holies. Previous emperors learned the hard way. Force the issue and Jerusalem burns. Ignore it and look weak. You've settled for taxing them extra and hoping they stay quiet. Spoiler from history, they won't. But that's a future emperor's problem. Assuming you live long enough to pass it on, religious festivals demand your presence and treasury. Games for Mars, ceremonies for Ceres, dedications to deified previous emperors who you know were just as mortal and constipated as you are. Each event costs fortunes you don't have but must spend because religious negligence equals political suicide. You dedicate temples to gods you doubt, funded by taxes from people who worship other gods, enforced by soldiers who've created their own gods. It's theological madness with a side of bankruptcy. At night, you sometimes wonder if any of it's real. If Jupiter exists, he's got a sick sense of humor putting you in charge. If the Christians are right, you're definitely going to their hell. If the atheists are right, you're wasting massive resources on imaginary friends. But these thoughts stay private because imperial religious doubt is the one heresy that unites all faiths in wanting you dead. So tomorrow, you'll examine more bird flights, burn more incense, and pretend divinity while mortal fear keeps you awake. The gods, if they exist, must be laughing. The frontier reports pile on your desk like prophecies of doom written in military dispatches. North, south, east, west. Every border of your empire burns with barbarian incursions, rival empires, and general violent disagreement about where Rome ends and chaos begins. You're playing the world's deadliest game of whack-a-mole. If the moles had cavalry and the hammer was held together with corruption and wishful thinking. Let's start with the Germans, because it always starts with the Germans. These cheerful forest dwellers have been probing the Rhine frontier since your great-great-grandfather's time. They're not a unified threat. That would be too simple. Instead, you've got dozens of tribes who hate each other slightly less than they hate Rome. The Chatti, Cherushi, Swebi, and others you can't pronounce without spitting, all taking turns raiding, retreating, and demanding tribute. Your frontier policy is basically build a bigger wall and hope they fight each other instead. Spoiler, they usually fight you. The Danube frontier offers its own flavor of nightmare. Here you've got Dacians, Sarmatians, and various Gothic tribes who view your border like a suggestion rather than a rule. Trajan conquered Dacia and hauled back enough gold to fund games for a decade. But holding Dacia? That's like holding water in a sieve while people shoot arrows at you. Every summer, barbarian raids increase. Every winter, your frozen legions wonder why they're defending a river that the enemy just walks across when it ices over, out east. The Parthian Empire grins at you across the Euphrates like your reflection in a funhouse mirror, another ancient empire, just as proud, just as broke, just as determined to prove who's really in charge. You fight over Armenia like divorced parents over a traumatized child. When Rome installs a king, Parthia invades. When Parthia installs a king, Rome invades. The Armenians, meanwhile, have made switching sides into an art form that would make Italian city-states jealous. Every emperor dreams of conquering Parthia. The smart ones remember what happened to Crassus and his legions. Hint, it involved a lot of molten gold and very little survival. The British frontier deserves special mention for sheer pointlessness. Your predecessors conquered this fog-wrapped island of mud, sheep, and homicidal natives for reasons. The southern half sort of accepts Roman rule between rebellions. The northern half is full of Picts who paint themselves blue and scream while charging your lines. You're building a wall across the entire island because apparently that's easier than admitting conquest was a mistake. The British legions consume resources like a gambling addiction while producing nothing but requests for more reinforcements and complaints about the weather. Africa presents a different challenge. Infinite desert-hiding mobile enemies who strike and vanish like lethal mirages. The Garamantes in the south raid when they please, disappearing into the Sahara where your legions can't follow without dying of thirst. Moorish tribes in the west practice guerrilla warfare that makes frontier defense essentially meaningless. You control the cities and pretend the rest is tributary territory, while raiders laugh at your maps from their desert strongholds. Here's what makes frontier defense truly impossible. Success creates failure. Push the borders out, and you've got more border to defend with the same number of troops. The equation never improves. Augustus figured this out and told his successors to hold what they had. But every emperor needs military glory, so they push a little here, conquer a little there, and suddenly you're defending a frontier that would take 6 months just to ride across. It's imperial overstretch with a death wish. The intelligence situation makes everything worse. Your scouts report what they think you want to hear, filtered through commanders who definitely don't want blame for missing the next invasion. By the time accurate information reaches Rome, it's outdated, exaggerated, or completely fabricated. That minor border skirmish in Germania could be 3 drunk warriors or 30,000 screaming berserkers. You'll find out when the city burns or doesn't. Diplomacy offers another avenue for disaster. You're constantly juggling alliances with tribes who view treaties as temporary pauses to rearm. Today's federated ally is tomorrow's invading horde. You pay tribute disguised as subsidies to keep them quiet, but that just funds their next invasion. Don't pay, and they invade immediately. The barbarians have figured out that threatening Rome pays better than actually attacking, so they've turned extortion into seasonal employment. Military technology provides false hope. Your legions have better armor, discipline, and engineering, but barbarians have numbers, knowledge of terrain, and the crucial advantage of not caring if they burn down the infrastructure. Romans build roads, aqueducts, cities. Barbarians burn them down and call it victory. You're playing civilization while they're playing pillage. And guess which game has simpler win conditions? Historians still argue whether Rome fell to barbarian invasions or internal collapse. From your throne, the distinction is academic. Every frontier crisis demands troops, money, and attention you don't have. Every successful defense just postpones the next attack. You're not ruling an empire. You're managing a controlled collapse, trying to lose territory slower than your predecessors while pretending it's all part of some grand strategy. The frontiers aren't borders. They're countdown timers to catastrophe. And they're all approaching zero simultaneously. The games, sweet Jupiter, the games. You think being absolute ruler meant you could skip the constant festivals, races, and gladiatorial bloodbaths that drain your treasury faster than a legion of corrupt tax collectors. But no, the Roman mob demands entertainment like addicts need their fix. And you're their dealer, supplier, and prisoner, all rolled into one purple-wrapped package. Miss one major festival and watch how fast bread and circuses becomes riots and revolution. The Colosseum yawns before you like a magnificent money pit that happens to eat people. 50,000 screaming citizens pack the stands, each one a potential rioter if the show disappoints. You sit in the imperial box, pretending to enjoy watching men hack each other to pieces while calculating the astronomical cost. A single day of decent games costs more than a small city's annual budget, but skimp on the spectacle, and those same citizens who cheer your generosity will gleefully cheer your assassination. Your editor, the game's organizer, approaches with today's program like a funeral director selling premium packages. 20 pairs of gladiators, expensive. Exotic animals from Africa, ruinously expensive. A mock naval battle. Are you insane? And a special execution spectacle featuring condemned criminals and an elaborate mythological theme, somehow even more expensive than the naval battle. You nod and approve because saying, "Let's just do some light wrestling and call it a day," is essentially announcing your own death warrant. Here's the beautiful economics of gladiatorial games. Everything costs more than it should. Gladiators need training, feeding, medical care. Ironically, they get better healthcare than most citizens because they're investments. Good gladiators cost fortunes. Dead gladiators cost more fortunes to replace. The crowd loves death, but also loves their favorite fighters. So you're constantly judging thumbs up or down based on mob psychology and fighter replacement costs. That roar from the crowd? That's the sound of your treasury emptying. The chariot races at the Circus Maximus offer a different flavor of bankruptcy. 4 racing factions, blues, greens, reds, and whites, command fanatical loyalty that makes religious divisions look tame. Nero, that artistic disaster, actually raced chariots himself. He won, even when he fell out of his chariot, because who's going to tell the emperor he lost? The factions are basically political parties disguised as sports teams. and backing the wrong color can literally cause civil war. Justinian lost half of Constantinople to racing faction riots. Your Roman mobs are just waiting for their chance. Animal shows provide exotic hemorrhaging of funds. The crowd wants lions, leopards, elephants, crocodiles, anything with teeth that can dramatically kill something else with teeth. Your hunters scour the empire's edges, depopulating entire ecosystems to feed Rome's bloodlust. A single elephant costs more than a skilled craftsman earns in a lifetime, and it'll probably die in 10 minutes fighting some condemned criminal with a pointy stick. The crowd cheers, your accountants weep, and Africa runs out of interesting wildlife. Special occasions demand special stupidity. Naumachia, mock naval battles, flood entire arenas to stage historical sea battles with real casualties. Thousands of condemned criminals and slaves butcher each other on floating platforms while citizens bet on which fleet wins. The engineering alone costs fortunes: waterproofing, drainage, the boats, the weapons, all for an afternoon's entertainment that'll be forgotten by next week when they demand something even more spectacular. You're literally drowning people in money, and somehow that's still not metaphorical enough. The psychology of the mob defies rational analysis. They claim to worship traditional Roman virtues, discipline, frugality, martial prowess, while demanding increasingly elaborate spectacles of waste and cruelty. A gladiator who fights well but boringly gets booed. A criminal who dies with insufficient drama disappoints. They want courage but choreographed, death but entertaining, virtue but covered in blood and served with snacks. You're not preserving Roman values. You're producing a death-themed variety show for sociopaths. Your attempts at cost-cutting trigger immediate backlash. Reduce the gladiator pairs. The emperor is stingy. Use criminals instead of professionals. The emperor insults us with inferior games. Caligula once ran out of criminals and fed some of the audience to the beasts, which was economical but admittedly bad for approval ratings. You're trapped between bankruptcy and revolution, with entertainment as the only currency that matters. The religious festivals add another layer of obligatory spectacle. Every god needs their games, their sacrifices, their specific traditions that definitely can't be modified to save money. The secular games happen once a century and last for days of non-stop entertainment. Miss them and you're impious. Participate and you're broke. Previous emperors tried combining festivals for efficiency. Surely Jupiter won't mind sharing his day with Mars. The resulting plagues, military defeats, and urban fires suggested otherwise, though that might have been coincidence. Do you feel lucky? Private games for special occasions, births, victories, anniversaries of previous emperors not being assassinated pile on additional expenses. Your courtiers helpfully remind you of every possible celebration requiring public generosity. That military victory in Germania, games. Your nephew's coming of age, games. Tuesday, why not games? Each senator who sponsors games tries to outdo the last, creating spectacular inflation that would make your debased currency jealous. At night, you calculate the mathematics of mob appeasement. How many racing days equal one avoided riot? What's the precise gladiator to stability ratio? Can you substitute quantity for quality? Or will the mob notice if you use condemned criminals in better armor? These calculations would be fascinating if they weren't directly connected to your survival. The mob doesn't love you. They love what you provide. Stop providing. And that love transforms into murderous rage faster than a chariot crash. The succession question hangs over your reign like a sword suspended by increasingly frayed thread. Every day you don't name an heir is another day of escalating conspiracy. Every day you do name an heir is another day that heir plots your death. It's the ultimate imperial paradox. You need a successor to ensure stability, but creating one destabilizes everything. Previous emperors have tried every method: adoption, birthright, co-emperorship, letting the Praetorians auction it off, and they all end the same way: badly, often with bonus stabbing. Your biological sons present the most obvious and dangerous candidates. Raise them to rule, and you're training your replacement. Ignore them, and they'll resent you enough to accelerate that replacement. Marcus Aurelius, that philosophical paragon, gave us Commodus, proof that imperial virtue skips generations like a demented gazelle. Your eldest shows promise, which means he's already cultivating senators and calculating when you'll become more valuable dead than alive. Your younger sons watch and learn, forming their own little alliances like a nursery school Game of Thrones. Adoption offers theoretical advantages. Choose the best man regardless of blood. Combine families. Create loyalty through gratitude. That's the theory. The practice? Tiberius resented Augustus for adopting him. Nero murdered Claudius's biological son after being adopted. Hadrian's adopted heir died conveniently young, requiring another adoption that definitely wasn't suspicious at all. Adoption doesn't create sons. It creates rivals with legal documentation. The co-emperor solution tempts with its apparent logic. Share power now to ensure smooth transition later. Augustus tried it with Agrippa and Tiberius. The Antonines perfected it, each emperor adopting and elevating his chosen successor. Worked great until it didn't. Give someone imperial power, and they wonder why they're only co-emperor. Don't give them real power, and they wonder what you're hiding. Marcus Aurelius made Commodus co-emperor at 16. The kid celebrated by hosting orgies and pretending to be Hercules. Sometimes sharing power just means doubling the crazy. Your extended family circles like vultures with genealogy charts. Nephews, cousins, in-laws, all calculating their proximity to purple. Some have strong claims, others have strong armies, which in Roman politics amounts to the same thing. That charming nephew you educated, he's corresponding with frontier legions. Your wife's brother who seems so grateful for his consulship. He's hosting very exclusive dinner parties where your health is the main topic. Every family gathering is a succession planning meeting where you're the only one not invited to plan. The Senate has opinions, because of course they do. They prefer weak emperors they can control, but not so weak that the empire collapses and interrupts their wine imports. They'll support your chosen heir right up until someone offers them a better deal. Their ideal succession involves lots of consultation, deliberation, and opportunities for bribery. Your ideal succession involves them shutting up and accepting your choice. These positions remain irreconcilable. Historical precedents offer no comfort. Augustus spent decades arranging successions, outliving most of his heirs through what historians call bad luck, but looks suspiciously like widespread poisoning. Galba adopted Piso, who enjoyed being heir for exactly 5 days before Otho murdered both of them. Nerva adopted Trajan under military pressure, essentially surrendering to the inevitable. Even successful successions usually involve someone dying under mysterious circumstances. Natural causes in Imperial Rome includes a surprising amount of midnight pillow application. Your advisors suggest various heir selection methods, ranging from reasonable to deranged. Public acclamation, mob rule. military approval, coup with extra steps, divine signs, bird entrails again, or merit-based selection, hilarious. One philosopher proposes choosing the most virtuous candidate, clearly having learned nothing from Commodus. Another suggests rotating emperorship between families, apparently forgetting that's called civil war. You nod thoughtfully, while wondering if any of these advisors are secretly working for potential heirs. The timing problem tortures you daily. Name an heir too early, and you've signed your death warrant. Too late and chaos erupts the moment you stop breathing. Some emperors announce heirs on their deathbeds, though this assumes you'll have a deathbed rather than a death alley or death latrine. Others keep their choice secret, leading to exciting succession crises where multiple candidates claim to be the real heir. Nothing says stable transition like armed camps arguing about what the dead emperor really wanted. Training your heir creates its own disasters. Give them real responsibility and they build power bases. Keep them idle and they're unprepared to rule. Commodus learned to be emperor by watching Marcus Aurelius, which apparently taught him that philosophy is boring, but gladiator cosplay is awesome. Caracalla learned by watching Septimius Severus, mainly learning that murdering your brother simplifies succession disputes, so your heir watches you now, learning either how to rule or how to avoid your mistakes, while making exciting new ones. The biological imperative haunts every decision. Romans expect dynasty, that magical bloodline connecting you to Augustus or whoever you've decided makes you legitimate, but your blood carries no guarantee of competence. That drooling cousin with the Habsburg jaw might be your closest male relative. Your brilliant freedman who actually understands administration can't inherit because wrong birth status. You're choosing between bad options while pretending one of them is good. Like a restaurant where every dish is poisoned, but you have to order something at night. You draft and redraft succession plans, each more unlikely than the last. Maybe you'll live forever. Emperors are divine, right? Maybe you'll find the perfect heir who's competent but not ambitious, loyal but not weak, acceptable to all factions but beholden to none. Maybe the Praetorians will suddenly develop institutional loyalty. These fantasies comfort you more than wine, which you can't drink anyway, because it might be poisoned by whoever's currently planning to succeed you. The divine expectations surrounding your supposedly godlike person create a special kind of insanity that would make actual gods laugh until they cried golden tears. You're not just emperor, you're diverse, Augustus, sacred, holy, and semi-divine, while simultaneously suffering from hemorrhoids, indigestion, and that persistent rash your Greek physician keeps promising will clear up any day now. The cognitive dissonance of being worshipped while your bowels rebel against last night's peacock tongues is enough to drive anyone mad, which explains a lot about your predecessors. Your morning levy demonstrates the absurdity perfectly. Hundreds of citizens wait to petition their living God, who currently needs 3 slaves to help him out of bed because his divine back went out again. They prostrate themselves before your sacred presence while you try not to wince from gout. O divine Augustus, in your infinite wisdom, they begin, while you're mainly wondering if it's too early for opium-laced wine to handle the divine headache splitting your allegedly celestial skull. The imperial cult requires you to maintain the fiction of semi-divinity without going full Caligula. He built a bridge between his palace and Jupiter's temple, so he could chat with the god as equals. He also dressed as various deities, demanded worship from senators, and tried to install his statue in the Jewish temple. These behaviors seemed perfectly logical to him, but less so to the Praetorians who introduced him to the pointy end of divine mortality. You must be godlike, but not god-mad. Sacred, but not silly. Divine, but not delusional. It's a tightrope walk, where falling means death and success means also probably death, just later. Physical ailments provide constant reminders of your extremely mortal flesh. Augustus had eczema and rotting teeth. Claudius drooled and twitched. Your own body betrays you daily with its mundane failures, constipation, joint pain, failing eyesight. The court physicians treat you with remedies that would qualify as torture in more enlightened times. Ground up gladiator liver for virility, electric eel shocks for depression, drilling holes in your skull to let out bad humors. Divine healthcare apparently means suffering through cures worse than diseases. Your public appearances require careful stage management to maintain divine dignity. That limp from an old war wound, hidden by choreographed movements, the tendency to vomit from anxiety, discreet buckets behind the throne. Nero performed on stage, thinking his divine artistry would inspire the masses. Instead, they politely applauded while inwardly cringing at their tone-deaf deity. You stick to scripted appearances where your divinity can be properly managed by professionals who understand that gods shouldn't sweat visibly or forget their lines. The contradiction between divine status and human needs creates daily embarrassments. Gods don't need food tasters, but you do. Gods don't fear assassination, but you check every shadow. Gods don't age, but your hair keeps falling out despite increasingly creative laurel crown arrangements. Your courtiers pretend not to notice when you need help mounting your horse, or when your divine stomach audibly rebels during sacrifices. They've mastered the art of selective blindness that keeps both their heads and your dignity intact. Sexual expectations add another layer of impossible standards. As a god, you should embody virility itself. Augustus supposedly deflowered a virgin every night to maintain his power. Tiberius's activities on Capri entered legend for their creative depravity. But you're 60, exhausted, and frankly more interested in sleeping than performing divine fertility rites with ambitious courtesans. The little blue pills won't be invented for 2 millennia, so you're stuck with aphrodisiacs made from crushed beetles and wishful thinking. Religious ceremonies demand physical performances your body can't deliver. Standing for hours in heavy robes under the Roman sun while perfuming altars and examining entrails. Your knees scream, your back spasms. Sweat pools in unfortunate places, but gods don't show weakness. One emperor allegedly soiled himself during a lengthy ceremony but continued standing in divine dignity while the smell informed everyone that gods do, in fact, have functioning bowels. The priest pretended it was incense. The crowd pretended to believe them. Illness presents the ultimate divine crisis. Gods don't get sick, but you've got a fever that could fry garum. Do you appear publicly and risk collapsing? Hide and risk rumors of weakness or death? Caligula's illness early in his reign might have caused his later madness. Or maybe the madness was always there, and illness just revealed it. Either way, divine convalescence is an oxymoron. You're either healthy and godlike or sick and mortal. There's no acceptable middle ground. The death problem looms largest. Gods are immortal, but emperors die with depressing regularity. The solution? Deification after death, when you can't embarrass yourself anymore. The Senate votes whether dead emperors become official gods, based largely on how much they hated you while alive. Caligula and Nero got damnatio memoriae, erased from history. Vespasian joked on his deathbed, "Oh dear, I think I'm becoming a god, showing more self-awareness than most. You'll die very mortal, then possibly become retroactively divine, which helps you not at all, but makes great propaganda for your successor. Your private moments reveal the exhausting weight of performed divinity. Alone in your chambers, you're just a tired old man with bad knees and worse digestion, trying to rule an ungovernable empire while pretending to be something between human and God. The purple robes hide the failing flesh. The divine titles mask very mortal fears. You're an actor playing a deity in a show where forgetting your lines or breaking character means death. Tomorrow you'll wake up divine again, assuming you wake up at all. The gods, if they exist beyond imperial propaganda, must find the whole thing hysterically funny. You would too, if it weren't killing you. Governing an empire that takes 3 months to cross means ruling by messenger pigeon, rumor, and desperate hope that your orders arrive before everything goes to hell. You're essentially playing the world's slowest game of telephone where every message passes through corrupt officials, semi-literate scribes, and bandits who think imperial dispatches make excellent ransom material. By the time you hear about a crisis, it's either resolved, escalated into catastrophe, or spawned 3 new crises you won't hear about for another month. Your morning correspondence perfectly illustrates the communication nightmare. That urgent report about barbarian invasions in Britain, written 10 weeks ago, travelled by exhausted horse relay, boat, another horse relay, and finally limping messenger who looks like he personally fought the barbarians. Your response will take another 10 weeks to return, by which time the invasion will be over, repelled, or successful enough that your orders are irrelevant. You're commanding yesterday's battles with tomorrow's information at the speed of arthritic molasses. The cursus publicus, your imperial postal system, functions like a dying animal pretending to run. Officially, mounted couriers can cover 50 miles a day on roads your legions built precisely for rapid communication. Reality? Horses die, riders steal them, stations lack fresh mounts, and local officials borrow imperial resources. That urgent military dispatch gets delayed because some municipal magistrate needed horses for his daughter's wedding. Your empire-wide communication system has the reliability of a drunk augur reading bird flights in a thunderstorm. Regional governors operate as semi-independent kings because what choice do they have? Wait 3 months for imperial guidance on every decision. They'd be governing rubble, so they act autonomously, creating policy, fighting wars, making alliances, and occasionally declaring themselves emperor because by the time you hear about it, they've either succeeded or died trying. You're not ruling an empire. You're suggesting general directions to people who might listen if the message arrives and they're still alive and haven't found someone offering better suggestions. The language barrier adds delightful complexity. Your empire speaks Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Celtic, Germanic dialects, Egyptian, and dozens of others. Every translation is a game of semantic roulette where send reinforcements. We're going to advance becomes send 3 and 4pence. We're going to a dance. Critical military intelligence filters through interpreters who might be incompetent, treacherous, or just having a bad day. That peace treaty you carefully negotiated. The Germanic chieftain thinks you agreed to very different terms because his translator was drunk on Roman wine. Official documents require precise language that nobody uses in real life. Your legal pronouncements, written in formal Latin that would make Cicero weep with joy, get translated into local vernacular by scribes who learned Latin from other scribes who learned it from guys who once visited Rome. By the time your carefully crafted law reaches the provinces, it's mutated into something you'd never recognize. citizens must register for taxation becomes citizens must sacrifice their sisters to the harvest moon through the magic of incompetent translation. Intelligence gathering operates on rumors traveling at merchant speed. Your spies send reports that are outdated before the ink dries. That conspiracy in Alexandria, by the time you hear about it, the conspirators have either succeeded, failed, or died of old age. You're making decisions based on information that ranges from mostly accurate but ancient to complete fiction but recent. Military intelligence is an oxymoron when intelligence travels at horse speed and enemies move whenever they want. Emergency communications theoretically use fire signals, towers on hills lighting beacons in sequence. Spectacular in theory, useless in practice. Fog, rain, lazy watchmen. And the unfortunate fact that fire only communicates something happened without specifying what. Is that beacon announcing invasion, rebellion, or just that someone knocked over a torch? By the time clarification arrives, Rome could be burning, again. At least Nero would appreciate the irony. Your personal correspondence faces constant interception. Every letter you send might be read by enemies, edited by officials, or sold to the highest bidder. Coded messages help until someone breaks or buys the code. Trusted messengers help until they're tortured, bribed, or decide your enemy pays better. Augustus used to write important messages himself in cipher, then seal them with his personal ring. Smart. Except everyone knew about it, making those letters prime targets for interception. You can't even write, "Wish you were here," without wondering who else wishes they knew where here was. Provincial administration operates on institutional lag. New governors arrive with instructions based on situations that changed 6 months ago. They spend months learning local conditions, send reports, wait for responses, then get recalled just when they understand their job. It's government by geological time in a world that changes seasonally. No wonder provincial corruption is endemic by the time you catch it. The corrupt official has died wealthy in his bed, while his sons have inherited both the stolen money and the position. At night, you stare at maps pretending you control the territories they show. Those neat lines marking provincial boundaries. Fiction maintained by cartographers who've never left Rome. That city marked as tributary ally. Could be ruins by now. The frontier you're defending might have moved 100 miles in either direction. You're ruling an empire you can't see, commanding armies you can't contact, trusting governors you can't supervise. It's like playing chess blindfolded against opponents who can see the board and move whenever they want, while you're still trying to remember where you left your knights. The medical situation makes you nostalgic for the days when you only worried about assassination. At least knives are quick. Roman medicine, on the other hand, is slow torture administered by well-meaning Greeks who think bleeding, purging, and prayers to Asclepius constitute comprehensive healthcare. Your personal physician, the highest paid doctor in the empire, confidently prescribes treatments that would qualify as war crimes if applied to enemies. But he's kept you alive this long, so you submit to his ministrations while privately wondering if death might be preferable. Your morning examination begins with uroscopy, because apparently your divine urine holds secrets. The physician swirls it, sniffs it, and, Jupiter help you, tastes it before declaring your humors unbalanced but improvable. This man has a medical degree from Alexandria, the Harvard of ancient medicine, and he's drinking your piss like a wine connoisseur. He prescribes a diet of boiled barley and dove droppings, because obviously that's what your divine constitution needs. The chronic conditions accumulated over decades of imperial living create a symphony of suffering. Gout from rich foods makes walking feel like stepping on molten glass. Kidney stones from wine and dehydration pass through your divine urethra like tiny, vengeful gods. Hemorrhoids from sitting on the throne, both literal and metaphorical, turn every bowel movement into an adventure in agony. Your physician treats these with remedies involving hot irons, metal probes, and substances extracted from animals you'd prefer not to think about. Dental care deserves its own circle of hell. Your teeth, like every Roman's, are disasters of decay and infection. The court dentist tool. Guillen's tools look like torture implements because they are. No anesthesia except wine and poppy juice, which barely dull the sensation of bronze forceps yanking infected molars from your divine jaw. Nero had golden dental prosthetics, which looked impressive but probably hurt worse than the original teeth. You endure the agony because imperial speeches delivered through bleeding gums undermine that whole divine majesty thing. Previous emperors' medical fates offer no comfort. Claudius, poisoned mushrooms, but maybe just regular food poisoning. The physicians couldn't tell. Trajan, stroke, or possibly poison, or possibly both. Hadrian tried to suicide by starvation when his dropsy became unbearable, but his doctors force-fed him, prolonging his divine agony. The pattern is clear. Imperial physicians excel at keeping you alive, but not comfortable. Possibly because comfortable emperors don't pay as well as desperate ones. Mental health treatment consists of stop being sad or we'll drill holes in your skull, melancholia, mania, paranoia, all treated with the same combination of bleeding, purging, and prayers. Caligula's madness might have been lead poisoning, syphilis, or just the natural result of unlimited power and childhood trauma. The physicians treated it with herbs and hope. Commodus's increasing insanity got managed with wine and gladiator fights, which probably didn't help, but at least kept him busy. Your pharmacopoeia reads like a witch's shopping list. Powdered mummy for longevity, gladiator blood for epilepsy, crocodile dung for complexion, electric eel shocks for lethargy. Every treatment carries side effects worse than the original condition. That Egyptian remedy for headaches contains enough opium to kill a horse, which explains why it works and why your predecessors developed concerning addictions. The Syrian cure for impotence involves ground rhinoceros horn and prayers to Priapus, neither of which address the underlying issue of being an exhausted 60-year-old ruling an ungovernable empire. Epidemic diseases sweep through Rome with depressing regularity, and imperial status provides no immunity. The Antonine Plague killed Marcus Aurelius, or maybe it was poisoning disguised as plague, because everything in imperial Rome has alternative explanations involving murder. When pestilence strikes, your physicians recommend fleeing to country estates, which helps you personally, but makes you look like a coward abandoning your people. Stay and risk divine death from extremely mortal diseases. Flee and risk political death from appearing weak. Medical decisions become political calculations with biological consequences. Surgical procedures offer excitement for those who enjoy gambling with their lives. Your physician can remove bladder stones, cataracts, and hemorrhoids using techniques that haven't changed since Hippocrates. No anesthesia beyond wine and mandrake. No antiseptics beyond prayers and wine. Romans use wine for everything. No antibiotics beyond hoping your divine constitution resists infection. That minor procedure to drain an abscess could easily become major funeral planning. Emperors who survive surgery often wish they hadn't. The court's medical politics rival the Senate for backstabbing. Physicians compete for imperial favor by promising impossible cures and blaming failures on colleagues. Your Greek doctor claims your Syrian doctor is poisoning you. Your Syrian doctor suggests your Greek doctor is incompetent. Your Egyptian specialist insists both are wrong and only ancient wisdom can save you. Meanwhile, you're getting sicker while they debate theoretical humors and planetary influences on your divine spleen. Prevention is a concept as foreign as effective treatment. Exercise might help, but vigorous activity is undignified for gods. Diet modification could work, but imperial banquets are political necessities where refusing dishes insults hosts who might already be plotting your death. Stress reduction would be wonderful if ruling Rome wasn't inherently stressful. Your physicians recommend moderation in all things, while serving an emperor whose job description is excessive in everything or die trying. At night, pain keeps you awake despite enough poppy juice to sedate a legion. Every twinge might be poison. Every ache could herald your end. You're a god maintained by medicine that would embarrass a competent veterinarian, ruling an empire while your body rebels against the basic functions of existence. Tomorrow brings more treatments, more pain, more physicians confidently prescribing remedies that definitely won't work, but might not kill you immediately. The irony isn't lost. You command the civilized world, but can't command your own bowels. God shouldn't need chamber pots. Yet here you are, divine and dysfunctional, praying to yourself for relief that won't come. The statistics tell the story better than any historian's narrative. Of the first 50 Roman emperors, 31 died violent deaths. That's a 62% murder rate, which makes being emperor statistically more dangerous than being a gladiator. At least gladiators got training and fair fights. You get conspiracies, poisons, and the constant knowledge that 2 out of 3 emperors end up as cautionary tales rather than retirement success stories. The methods of imperial demise read like an assassin's training manual. Stabbing remains popular, classic, direct, hard to misinterpret. Julius Caesar got 23 wounds, though only 1 was fatal, suggesting either enthusiasm or poor coordination among conspirators. Caligula received 30, Domitian 7. Aurelian probably lost count. The Senate House, palace corridors, even latrines, nowhere safe from sharp objects wielded by disappointed supporters. Your purple robes might as well have targeting circles woven into the fabric. Poison offers subtler satisfaction for the sophisticated murderer. Claudius and his mushrooms set the gold standard, though historians still debate whether Agrippina poisoned him or he just had catastrophically bad luck with fungi. The beauty of poison? Plausible deniability. That fever could be natural. Those convulsions might be epilepsy. The advantage for assassins is obvious. No bloody hands. No obvious violence, just an emperor who coincidentally dies right when his heir needs the throne. Your food taster helps, assuming he hasn't been bribed, threatened, or replaced with someone immune to whatever's on tonight's menu. Praetorian intervention provides the most ironic deaths. Pertinax ruled 86 days before his bodyguards killed him for not paying enough. Balbinus and Pupienus lasted 99 days before Praetorians dragged them from the palace and beat them to death in the streets. These are the men sworn to protect you, demonstrating their protection by ensuring you need a successor. It's like hiring wolves to guard sheep, then acting surprised when you run out of sheep. Forced suicide offers a veneer of dignity over straightforward murder. Nero's Qualis Artifex Perio, what an artist dies in me, while fumbling with a dagger because he couldn't even kill himself properly. Otho managed it efficiently, earning posthumous respect for doing the assassin's job himself. The Senate sometimes votes to allow suicide instead of execution, presenting it as mercy when really it's just murder with fewer witnesses and less cleanup. Military rebellion provides spectacular endings. Maximinus Thrax, the giant emperor, got his head cut off by his own troops and paraded on a stick. Gallienus was assassinated by his generals during a siege because apparently external enemies weren't sufficient. Philip the Arab died in battle against his successor, or was murdered by his troops who decided to switch sides mid-fight. The lesson? Never turn your back on your army, especially the parts with swords. Even natural deaths look suspicious in context. Marcus Aurelius died of plague in a military camp. Or was it poison from his son Commodus? Septimius Severus died of illness in Britain, conveniently allowing his sons to abandon the successful campaign. Historians debate each natural death because in Imperial Rome, nature includes a surprising amount of human assistance. That fever might be real, but who's to say it wasn't helped along? The locations of imperial deaths tell their own story. Tiberius smothered in his villa, allegedly by his successor's orders. Caracalla stabbed while urinating on a roadside. Elagabalus murdered in a latrine and thrown into the Tiber. The undignified ends mock the divine pretensions. You can build monuments to your glory, but you'll probably die in a bathroom or bedroom, choking on your own ambitions or someone else's. The aftermath of imperial deaths reveals Roman efficiency at its finest. Your body's barely cold before the Praetorians acclaim someone new. The Senate votes to damn your memory or deify you based on how much they hated you alive. Your statues get recarved with the new emperor's face. Economical recycling that saves marble and makes political statements. Your reforms get reversed. Your favorites get executed. Your family gets exiled or murdered. Death doesn't end your humiliation. It just makes you unable to object. Some emperors try to cheat fate through paranoia. Tiberius retreated to Capri, surrounding himself with astrologers and throwing enemies off cliffs. Still died, possibly murdered. Domitian lined his palace with reflective stone to see assassins approaching. They waited until he was reading, then stabbed him anyway. Commodus fought as a gladiator, thinking it made him invincible. His wrestling partner strangled him in the bath. Paranoia doesn't prevent death, it just makes your final years miserable. The survivors, that miraculous 38% who died naturally, often wish they hadn't. Augustus lived to 75, increasingly bitter and paranoid. Antoninus Pius made it to 74, boring everyone, including himself. Dying young and violently at least ensures historical interest. Dying old in bed just means you successfully postponed the inevitable while growing increasingly decrepit. Victory looks a lot like defeat with extra wrinkles. You know these statistics. Every emperor does. It's the worst kept secret in Rome. Purple equals target. Yet here you sit, wearing the same color that marked 62% of your predecessors for death. Maybe you'll beat the odds. Maybe you're the exception who'll die peacefully, surrounded by loving family who definitely aren't holding pillows suspiciously close to your face. Maybe the Praetorians really do respect you. Maybe that food tastes funny because of new spices, not hemlock. Or maybe you're already dead and just haven't stopped breathing yet. In Imperial Rome, the question isn't whether you'll die violently. It's whether you'll see it coming or be surprised by which friend holds the blade. At least you're in good company. The halls of the dead must be crowded with purple ghosts comparing assassination stories, placing bets on how long you'll last. History suggests not long. But then again, you're divine, right? Surely gods don't die from something as mundane as massive blood loss. Time to find out. The sun sets over the Palatine Hill, painting your palace walls the color of dried blood. How poetically appropriate. You've survived another day as emperor, which, statistically speaking, is an achievement worth celebrating. Or it would be, if celebrating didn't require food tasters, loyal guards you can't trust, and the constant vigilance that's slowly killing you anyway. Your evening routine begins. The slaves prepare your chamber, checking for scorpions, snakes, and creative assassination attempts. Your physician arrives with tonight's cocktail of poppy juice and prayers, promising this blend will surely help you sleep without the nightmares of purple-robed predecessors. You nod, knowing he's lying, knowing he knows you know. But what else is there? Divine insomnia is still insomnia. The palace grows quiet as darkness falls. Somewhere in the city below, citizens sleep peacefully, dreaming of bread and circuses while you lie awake calculating threats. Every creak could be an assassin. Every shadow might hide a blade. But exhaustion is stronger than paranoia. And slowly, finally, your divine eyelids grow heavy. Perhaps tomorrow will be different. Perhaps the Senate will support you. The Praetorians will protect you. Your family will love you for who you are rather than what you can give them. Perhaps the frontiers will hold. The treasury will fill itself, and the empire will run smoothly without constant crisis. Perhaps you'll be the emperor who breaks the pattern, who dies peacefully in old age, remembered fondly by grateful Romans. Or perhaps tomorrow you'll join the majority, another purple casualty in Rome's endless game of thrones. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, you're still breathing, still reigning, still pretending divinity, while mortality seeps through every crack in your painted facade. The stars wheel overhead, indifferent to human ambition. The empire sleeps, dreaming its collective dreams of glory and gold. And you, trapped between godhood and grave dirt, finally close your eyes. Whatever tomorrow brings, conspiracy or calm, poison or peace, at least for these few hours. The purple burden lifts. Sleep now. Weary emperor, let the weight of the world slip from your shoulders. Dream of simpler times, if you can remember them. Dream of anything but purple, sweet dreams. If gods can dream, dawn comes soon enough, bringing with it another day of impossible choices, inevitable betrayals, and the constant, crushing certainty that power is just death wearing makeup. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, mercifully, you rest.